I'm very, very pleased to be joined by Abdul El Sayed, who is a candidate for the Senate in running the Democratic primary in Michigan. This is being co-sponsored also with Jewish Currents. Neither Jewish Currents nor my newsletter do endorsements, and we just talk to people who we find interesting. And I'd be very happy to talk to Abdul's opponents if they decided it was worth their time. Abdul, thank you so much for doing this.
It's always an honor, and I'm looking forward to the conversation. I've enjoyed every conversation we've gotten to share.
So have I. So you've been traveling all over the state, imagining doing hundreds of events. What's the question you're most frequently asked?
What are you going to do about the fact that I can't see a doctor?
Hmm.
Even people who are insured in our healthcare system understand that there is a $6,000, $10,000 axe hanging over their head should they actually try to use their health insurance. It comes in the form of a deductible. And so you've got folks who are insured who are literally skirting their insurance because they're afraid of having to pay that cost. I mean, think about it. The median income in this country is about $80,000 for a family of four. If you've got a $6,000 axe that you got to pay just because you got sick, at the end of the day, you're functionally uninsured. I mean, the whole point of health insurance is it was supposed to buy you out of the financial calamity of getting sick. And unfortunately, our healthcare system has only gotten worse on that front. And so that's the question I think I hear most often. I hear it in VFW halls in Escanaba. I hear it in churches in Detroit. I hear it in living rooms in Grand Rapids. And it is an existential question. And a lot of folks think healthcare is not the same as affordability. But think about who eats first. If you get paid every 2 weeks or every month in a W-2, after the government eats through FICA, your health insurer eats. And so they literally eat before you do. And then all for the privilege of getting to pay $6,000 to get the health care that you thought you had already paid for every single paycheck.
And what do you think, you've had a front row seat about understanding the American public in this moment and these questions that people in the media obsess about political polarization and how is it that Donald Trump won this election and is, how do Democrats and Republicans see the world differently? I'm just curious, what has struck you? What have you learned from talking to so many people in your state over this last year or so?
Honestly, that we're not as polarized as we're made to seem. If you transact with politics on a screen, you would think that we are miles and miles apart. If your engagement with politics is in a living room or in a union hall or on the street, most people complain about the same issues. Shouldn't be this hard to afford a second bag of groceries. Shouldn't be this hard to pay your rent or know that you could ever own a home. Shouldn't be this hard to see a doctor. Shouldn't be this hard to work the same job tomorrow you worked yesterday. And people agree on the problems. They've just been told by politicians on both sides that the other guy's solution or the other gal's solution is the wrong one rather than being pointed to the right one. And so we're kind of running on this race, sort of an anti-partisan kind of politics, which is to say, I'm not here to tell you I'm a Democrat and the Republicans are bad, or I'm a Republican because I'm not. I'm here to tell you that right now our politics have been corrupted by a system that has us doing the bidding of big corporations or billionaires or special interests who can buy your politicians on either side of the aisle so that you end up working to put money in their pockets rather than government ending up to work to make sure that you have money in yours. And I think when you focus on that issue, right, not indicting a past, but trying to come together around a future, we're a lot closer than we think. And this campaign has been really eye-opening for me because, I'll go up north. I was in Manistee, which most people don't know is like here in Michigan, on 4 o'clock on a Tuesday, and we had 300 people, none of whom looked like me, in that room because they were interested in a politics that really was about trying to get the root cause of the problem. And I think if we focused more on that, as Democrats in particular, if we focused more on that and stopped taking money from the corporations who are corrupting the system in the first place so that we could speak truth about what our values are and how we actually serve working people, I think we'd find a lot of success on the back end.
Folks should put questions in the chat, and I'll try to convey some of them. And how would you say the Democrats that you meet in Michigan feel about the Democratic Party right now?
They're frustrated. They just don't feel like the party is listening to them, and they feel like, unfortunately, this party has become a handmaiden to the very same corporations and billionaires who are dominating our politics on either side of the aisle. We have a way forward here. I believe that in the Democratic Party, in the way that the Democratic Party, when we are true to our ideals, when we step out of this corporate system of politics, we really can achieve big things. And we've seen it in the past. You think about the party of FDR, you think about the party of LBJ, you think about how far we've gotten from that party where we believe that government really can do big things to buy you out of a whole lot of problems in your life, whether it's guaranteeing you health care or standing up to corporations or standing up for unions or empowering a system of politics that's not bought off. We really can achieve those things. So we have a way forward. And I think a lot of Democratic voters are just frustrated because it's right there. It really is right there. It's there for the taking. And our job in this campaign is to demonstrate what it looks like to build a politics of by and for the people, where we're focused 100% on people's issues and asking, how do we make sure that government answers for you? How do we make sure that happens? Because it's not bought off by the corporations who've been buying off politicians for too long, because it is standing for things like union rights and antitrust policy and guaranteed health care, because it is keeping our money here at home rather than sending it abroad to buy bombs and tanks for foreign militaries to backstop apartheid or genocide or war, right? These are not hard things. I study complicated things. This is not that complicated. The hard part about it is we've forgotten that politics is about the question, who are we and who do we want to be, rather than these momentary calculations of where are these voters and where are these voters. Turns out all these voters are struggling and all these voters need solutions, and our job is to talk about those solutions without being worried about where money is going to flow and about who's going to say otherwise.
How often do you get asked about Israel?
Often. And not because people are preoccupied with the question of what's happening over there. It's because people understand that for a long time, our public policy in this country has been to send $3 billion, $5 billion, you name the number of $1 billion over there, rather than spending that same money here, to invest in our healthcare here, to invest in our schools here, to rebuild our infrastructure here. And then you ask yourself, okay, what is the value of this money? And you watch as a foreign government is using that money to buy bombs and tanks, to backstop apartheid, to backstop illegal settlements, and to backstop a genocide. And then to a country that had the audacity to pull us into a war that we had no business fighting. And so I think that is the crux of the issue. And so when you ask yourself, all right, so my kids are struggling for basic literacy, my kids are struggling to see a doctor, and you want to send my money over there to bomb other people's kids? How the F does that make sense? And I think that's where it comes up. And I think we have to have an honest conversation about the fact that our foreign policy has been driven in large part by the focus of one special interest group that spends 9 figures every cycle to make sure that the things I just said don't get said by elected officials.
And so the policy debate about U.S. policy towards Israel has really been shifting in the Democratic Party, particularly, pretty dramatically. And it seems to me that in some ways we're moving past the question of whether the U.S. should give military aid towards the question of whether the U.S. should sell weapons to Israel at all. And I'm just curious, what's your view, not just on military aid, but on the question of what weapons, if any, you would sell to Israel if you were in charge?
Look, this is settled policy. We have laws on the books called the Leahy laws that condition our military aid and or our weapon sales to countries that violate human rights law. And it's very clear that Israel has violated human rights law. And I just think that it makes no sense for us to be selling bombs and tanks to a country that we know is going to turn around and use them to violate other people's human rights. So I don't believe that we should be sending or any military aid or selling any weapons to a country that violates basic human rights law. And I don't differentiate the difference between offensive and defensive insofar as, if you give a country that is violating human rights law body armor to protect itself, at some point, don't be surprised when they continue to violate human rights law. And the law is clear on this. It doesn't differentiate between the two. Similarly, like if you're, even in the best interpretation, like if your neighbors tell you, hey, we want to build an alarm system in our house, you're like, okay, cool. They're like, we'd like you to pay for it. You're like, but why? They're like, well, because if our house is safer, then you'll also be safer. I was like, okay, then make your house safer if that's what you want to do. But it's not my job to pay for your house being safer. And so this approach that we've often taken to our foreign policy, where we have all of these client states that we think operate in our best interest, I think has been absolutely blown up by recent history. Ask yourself whether or not we're safer because we're at war with Iran. Ask yourself whether or not, your gas is cheaper, because certainly in Michigan we're paying $5 a gallon for gas. Ask yourself whether or not you think the world is a more stable place because of the war that we went into at the beckoning of Benjamin Netanyahu, who's been wanting to have this war fought for the better part of 40 years and finally found a president dumb enough to do it. So I just think we have to rethink this alliance. And then the final point is this: any principles-based approach to American foreign policy ought to be premised on international law. And let's not forget, it was our country that led the formation of international law and the institutions that are supposed to uphold international law, whether it's the UN or the ICC or the ICJ. And my vision of foreign policy is one where we are the first among equals to enforce international law. And it's crazy to me to watch our country run cover for a foreign government that has clearly violated international law over and over and over again, and then uses our cover to go many steps further, and worse, pulls us into conflagrations we have no business being a part of. And so, whether it's foreign military aid or weapons sales, or the work we do to protect the Israeli government from justice in international institutions, none of that is justifiable based either in our own self-interest or any sense of basic principle and morality.